For the first part of today's lesson, we're going to focus on adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. I'm going to model one for you first. You can write this on your paper and solve it with me, or you can just watch for this first one. The first problem I want to solve is 2/10 plus 12/100. We can't just simply add the numerators because the denominators don't match. What we need to do is get both of our denominators to be 100. So we can simply multiply the numerator and the denominator of the first fraction by 10. Then we get a new equivalent fraction of 20/100 plus 12/100. Now, since the denominators match, we can simply add the numerators. So 20 plus 12 is 32/100. That's the simple basic answer. To show this answer in lowest terms, I need to find a factor that is divisible by both of these numbers. So I have to ask myself, what number can we use to divide 32 and 100? A number that we can divide both of those by is 4. So we can say 32 divided by 4 and 100 divided by 4. 32 divided by 4 is 8, and 100 divided by 4 is 25. So for 2/10 plus 12/100, we could say the answer is 32/100 or 8/25 for lowest terms. Now we're going to do one together. So if you don't have your paper and pencil, get those now. Pause your video if you need to go find them. And then we're going to solve one together. All right, the one we're going to solve together, excuse me, looks like this. Let's do 23/100. So write that on your paper, plus 3/10. Now remember, our denominators have to match before we can add the numerators. So I want you to pause your video now and solve this problem for me. Once you have your answer, turn your video back on to check your work. All right, let's see how you solve this problem. Since we know the denominators don't match, we need to make them match. And we can do that by multiplying the 3 and the 10 in this fraction both by 10 to then get a new equivalent fraction of 30/100. Now we can add 23/100 plus 30/100. So 23 plus 30. Now if you couldn't do that one in your head, you could go over to the side and write 23 plus 30 or 30 plus 23 and solve it like that for an answer of 53/100. Now, thinking about putting that in lowest terms, I do not believe that there is a factor that we can use to divide both of these numbers. So I'm going to leave my answer as 53/100. If that's what you had for your answer, good job. Okay, now I'm going to move on to doing some subtraction. I'm going to model a subtraction problem for you, and then we'll do one together. I'm going to start with 21/100 minus 1/10. Again, our denominators don't match, so I have to make them match before I can move on. So I can multiply both of these fractions by 10, then rewrite my fraction or my equivalent fraction of 10 hundredths, then bring down my 21 hundredths and subtract here. 21 minus 10 equals 11, and the denominator stays 100. And that's already in lowest terms. And now I'm going to erase, and we're going to do this one together, so get that paper and pencil back. On your paper, this is what I need you to write. 5/10 for your first fraction minus 15 hundredths. That's what you're going to solve now. Remember, make those denominators match before you do any subtraction. Pause your video now to solve it. Try to put it in lowest terms if you can. Then turn your video back on when you're ready to check. All right, let's check our work. For this problem, the first thing I would have done is multiply my numerator and denominator for the first fraction by 10. So then I get an equivalent fraction of 50 hundredths. Then I can bring down my second fraction, 15 hundredths. And I can subtract 50 minus 15. Now, if I couldn't just do that in my head, remember you can always go over to the side and solve 50 minus 15. For a total of 35 hundredths. Now, if you had 35 hundredths for your answer, you're right, but that's not in lowest terms. So let's talk about what that answer would look like in lowest terms. I need to find a number that I can use to divide 35 and 100. So think about the factors of 35. There aren't even that many. The first ones that pop into my head are 7 and 5, because 7 times 5 is 35. I know 100 can't be divided by 7, but I know 100 can be divided by 5. So I'm going to try dividing both of these numbers by 5. 35 divided by 5 is 7. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So for 5/10 minus 15 hundredths, you can say the answer is 35 hundredths, or in lowest terms, 7/20ths. Make sure you can see that, 7/20ths. All right, now I'm going to erase and model one more type of problem where the denominators don't match. This time, my fraction that I'm working with is actually going to be a mixed number. So I'm going to start with 3 7/10 plus 4 13 hundredths. Another problem where my denominators and my fractions don't match. But you all know how to make that work. We need to get both of my fractions to have matching denominators. So I can take both of those, multiply them by 10. So now my mixed number is written 3 and 7 times 10 is 70. 10 times 10 is 100. So 3 and 70 hundredths. That's the same as 3 and 7/10. Then I'm going to add that to 4 and 13 hundredths. For that part, I'm going to first add my whole numbers. So 3 plus 4 equals 7. Then I'm going to add my fractions. 70 hundredths plus 13 hundredths. Add those two together, that is 83 hundredths. Then I add my 7 plus my 83 hundredths. And I'll put that answer up here. My total is 7 and 83 hundredths. Let me see. All right, I'm going to give you some problems to practice on the Google form. Oh, no, never mind. We forgot to do one together. Let's erase our boards. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked. I'm going to erase mine. Now you're going to practice one similar to the one I just did. Okay, I want you to start with 5 and 23 hundredths. So write that one on your paper first. 5 and 23 hundredths. And let's do this one as a subtraction. Minus 1 and 1/10. Remember, we need to have our denominators match before we can do any work. So I want you to pause your video now and then solve this problem. Once you have your answer, try to get it down to the lowest terms as possible, and then turn your video back on to check your work. All right, let's check our work. Hopefully you started by taking your fraction from your second number and multiplying the numerator and the denominator both by 10. So you have a new mixed number of 1 and 10 hundredths. And then you can subtract that from your first mixed number, 5 and 23 hundredths. So then we can start by subtracting the whole numbers. 5 minus 1 equals 4. Then subtract the fractions. 23 hundredths minus 10 hundredths. You should be able to subtract 23 minus 10, and that is 13 hundredths. Then you can put those two together. Your whole number answer plus your fraction answer. And then insert that up at the top. 4 and 13 hundredths should be your answer. 4 and 13 hundredths. Sorry if you can't see it all. If you had 4 and 13 hundredths and you got that by yourself, nice job. Now is when I'm going to stop the video and I'm going to give you an addition problem with unlike denominators, a subtraction problem with unlike denominators, and then a mixed number problem with unlike denominators. Once you've answered those in your Google form, come back for the next part of the lesson.